Well, the president seemed to move us one step closer to a constitutional crisis today simply by saying, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens is an okay answer to some questions, but it is a very, very bad answer to other questions. Are you here to rob this bank? We'll see what happens. That is not a good answer. And it is a terrible answer to questions like this question.
Would you be willing to speak under oath to give your version of
100%.
See, that's the right answer. That's the right answer. The President of the United States is willing to submit to appropriate legal process. The President gave that answer 7 months ago. Today, the President was asked exactly the same question, and he said this.
We'll see what happens. I mean, certainly I'll see what happens. But when they have no collusion, and nobody's found any collusion at any level, it seems unlikely that you'd even have an interview.
That answer sent Washington political and legal analysts into overdrive today, trying to figure out what that meant. Would the president refuse to cooperate with the special prosecutor? Would he even refuse to respond to a subpoena? And what would happen if the president defied a special prosecutor's subpoena? We will consider all of those questions, but first, let's consider what's the difference? What's the difference between now and 7 months ago? 7 months ago, the special prosecutor was quietly working in secret and publicly revealing none of the results of his investigation. 7 months ago, the special prosecutor had brought no indictments and had no convictions, no guilty pleas. Since then, the special prosecutor has a guilty plea from George Papadopoulos, the Trump campaign ad who reportedly provoked the opening of an FBI investigation of the Trump campaign's contacts with Russia during the campaign by telling the Australian ambassador to the United Kingdom that Russia had obtained emails about Hillary Clinton. And the special prosecutor has a guilty plea from the Trump campaign's top foreign policy advisor, former General Michael Flynn, who became President Trump's national security advisor in the White House for 24 days before he was forced to resign because of an FBI investigation of him that was underway long before there was a special prosecutor. The special prosecutor took over that investigation of Michael Flynn and within a few months obtained a guilty plea from Flynn, who along with Papadopoulos is now working as a fully engaged witness for the special prosecutor, telling the special prosecutor everything that he knows, as is Papadopoulos, including, of course, everything that they know about Donald Trump himself. And Donald Trump knows that they're doing that now. Donald Trump also knows that his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, could turn on him at any moment and reach a plea agreement with the special prosecutor on his indictments for money laundering and other crimes, as can Paul Manafort's partner, who also joined the Trump campaign and is also facing the same kind of indictments Paul Manafort is now facing from the special prosecutor. So what's changed in 7 months? Donald Trump knows tonight that the special prosecutor already has at least 2 fully cooperating witnesses revealing everything that they know about Donald Trump, and might soon have 2 more. And Donald Trump knows that the special prosecutor's investigation is getting even closer to his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who faces the possibility of being indicted for lying about his contacts with Russians and other foreign nationals. In other words, the noose is tightening around the Trump White House and the Trump family. And the president knows by now that all of his lawyers' public claims that the special prosecutor's work was winding down are pure fiction, and that the special prosecutor is still adding to his staff of legal experts pursuing this investigation. The most notable new member of the team is Ryan K. Dickey, a federal prosecutor of the Justice Department's computer crime section. Ryan Dickey participated in the investigation of the famous hacker known as Guccifer, who is now serving a federal prison sentence. Donald Trump does not know how to use email. He clearly does not have the experience or the capacity to even begin to imagine what a cyber investigation actually is and what And Donald Trump might then actually assume that he is safe from Ryan Dickey's cyber investigation simply because he himself never uses email. But everything that has happened in the special prosecutor's investigation in the last 7 months has
president to do that. We interviewed Nixon after he resigned. Clinton had to testify, Ford had to testify, so he's going to have to testify, and he may as well do it gracefully instead of making it look even worse for him.
Go ahead, Jill, sorry.
The second thing, which is really important, is that it's sort of like what led to the Saturday Night Massacre when Nixon tried to compromise with us by offering, he wouldn't give us the tapes, he would let Senator Stennis listen to the tapes and tell us what they said, which would not have been admissible evidence. We couldn't accept that. That's what led to the press conference that led to the Saturday Night Massacre. So he can't compromise, and I don't think Mueller will be likely to say, okay, you can answer written questions. That's just not going to happen. And the third thing is, he's going to be in a big risk because he doesn't know what Flynn actually knows, what other cooperating witnesses, Papadopoulos and maybe others who are cooperating. He doesn't know. John Dean has said the biggest mistake the White House made during Watergate was they didn't realize how much he knew, and he testified fully, and that was a very good grounds for us to cross-examine all of the defendants, including the president. So I think those are important things to keep in mind in this.
Ron and Jill, I want you to put your heads together on this, if you might. And Ron, on the question of a federal criminal process here, let's say this comes to a subpoena. Who goes to the White House with what subpoena? And I mean quite literally, Ron, since you've worked there, how does that person get into the White House? Because the only way into the White House is that someone in the White House has to grant you that admission at the White House gate. How does this work?
Well, you know, Lawrence, we'll see just how obstreperous President Trump gets. But there are definitely ways to serve that subpoena. At the end of the day, you know, it's the duty, ultimately, I suppose, of the Deputy Attorney General on one of his weekly visits over to the White House to deliver it if need be. I'm not really worried about the subpoena getting there. I think the question is what President Trump does when it arrives. And as Jill said, this isn't a question of what he wants to do. He has no choice. He has one right that's left, though. We talked the other night about the briefing on the Constitution Donald Trump got. I hope he got up to the Fifth Amendment, because that may be, you know, that may be what this comes down to, whether or not we have the incredible spectacle of the sitting President of the United States repeatedly asserting his Fifth Amendment defense to decline to answer Bob Mueller's questions. That's really the only option in the end Donald Trump has.
I have a funny feeling the Fifth Amendment is the only one that Donald Trump knew before becoming president. But Jill, let me go back to you just quickly on this procedural notion. Did you have to consider this during the Nixon investigation? If we have to serve a subpoena, how do we actually put the piece of paper in the president's hand?
We actually did worry about that. We eventually worked out the subpoena went through his lawyers, and they accepted delivery of the subpoena. But then we worried about if he didn't comply with the subpoena by turning over the documents, how would we get a marshal to enter the White House to seize the documents? That was a serious question, and we never really figured out an answer, but luckily public pressure after the Saturday Night Massacre forced the president to agree to give give us the tapes.
And Jennifer Rubin, as we sit here tonight discussing this, Richard Nixon seems like such a reasonable man compared to...
and a smart one, yes.
Yeah, compared to Donald Trump. Also, you know, a law school graduate who understood the process and ultimately, I think Jill would agree, recognized that there wasn't going to be a way this was eventually going to close in, and he wasn't going to put the country through this strange exercise of a marshal standing out on Pennsylvania Avenue trying to figure out how to get in. Right. But Jennifer, what's your reaction to what you heard the president say today, backing off that 100% guarantee that he would cooperate?
Well, you have to understand that despite all the bluster, despite all the chest pounding and the throwing the dust in the air, Donald Trump is a coward. He's a physical coward. He's an emotional coward. So he will not have the nerve to stand up and say, I won't be questioned by Mr. Mueller. And then when he does, he is going to be putty in his hand because three things. One, he doesn't know what he shouldn't say. He doesn't know, and he still doesn't accept
Smash is about clearing out the viruses, slowing the data pathways we use.
I mean, you know, this is far from anything other than a rounding of the wagons to figure out ultimately who gets charged with what. And that's got to be scaring Donald Trump tonight.
Well, luckily, a reporter got a chance to ask the president today what he meant by Republicans taking control of the investigation. And we have that video right now.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Jill, he meant thank you very much, apparently. That was his answer to that question.
That's his answer to a lot of questions, and I think he has plenty to be worried about. And I think we're also getting away from what the main purpose of the congressional investigations is, which is to find out how to protect American elections from the Russians interfering with them. And I think that the Democratic report today, Senator Cardin spoke very well about that, is something that we need to pay attention to. What are the steps we should be taking before 2018 so that we have a free and fair election, not subject to foreign intervention?
And Jennifer, that is the part that I'm so glad Jill brought it up. That's the part that gets lost in all of this, in all of our coverage, because we are pursuing this criminal investigation at the same time. But there is also the issue of how do we protect this country's election process going forward. And this is an administration that's doing absolutely nothing about that.
Right. That's what really struck me is, first of all, the Republicans didn't join in this report. It's a superb report. I talked to a number of foreign policy specialists. It's detailed. It's factually accurate. It makes concrete suggestions. Why in the world Republicans would not join in this in any other time? It would be unheard of, but they can't join in it because Donald Trump won't admit that Russia's a real problem. So are they interested in protecting the country? Doesn't seem like it. And secondly, if you go back to that transcript from the fascinating interview before the Judicial Committee by Glenn R. Simpson, who is the founder of Fusion GPS, it is very obvious that the lawyer doing the questioning on behalf of the Republicans is interested in no real substantive data. His entire line of questioning had nothing to do with the substance, either of the dossier, the so-called dossier, or the level of confidence that Fusion GPS had in the dossier or anything else in substance. They are there for one reason and one reason only, and that is to protect the president. In that regard, they've become complicit in this. They've become co-enablers. They've become co-conspirators in a plot to obstruct justice. And I think when this all washes out, there are going to be people like Lindsey Graham, who used to have a spine and who now, I think, just pines to be Mr. Trump's Secretary of State, who are going to look very bad in the light of history.
And Jill, to Jennifer's point, when you read that transcript, as I did yesterday, the first, long hour of it at least is all this stuff that is not directly on point to why this witness is there. Once you get to the real issues of why the witness is there, it's really just the Democratic staff that are asking those questions, although you can't tell in the reading of that whether it's Democratic staff or Republican staff. The questions all make perfect sense, and they're trying to pursue what was really going on in that investigation. But when you step back for it and look at who asked the questions, the Republican staff, as Jennifer points out, really did not ask virtually any relevant questions at all.
You are both absolutely correct, and it is very much confounding to me that there could have been a criminal referral made by Graham and Grassley after that testimony. It's clear that he Steele was a completely credible source, that the FBI wasn't acting fast enough, and he was genuinely concerned about the impact on American election and on American democracy. And if he went to the press, it was because he was trying to make sure that Americans knew what was going on and that he believed his information and had credible information. So it's a very concerning how the Republicans handled that hearing and the suppression of the tape. Congratulations to Senator Feinstein for releasing it.
We are now going to have to create a new graphic for this show written by Ron Klain called Witch Hunt, W-H-I-C-H. Jill Wine-Banks.
Except for my pin. Notice my witch pin.
Right. Jill Wine-Banks and Ron Klain, thank you both very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks,
Jennifer, please stick around.